Trump campaign is now reaching voters online.
You are seeing the President of the United States. Look at the lines.
You join our movement.
A lot of President Trump supporters here.
Greatest movement in the history of our country.
I think the one thing we can say they all have in common is they are fighters, both figuratively and literally.
We are leaders, and our community is going to ensure that President Trump gets reelected soundly in November.
Because we have such strong leadership coming from the White House, we are making it through.
God has called President Trump for this purpose in this time, so let's keep voting for him, and we will keep winning.
I honestly don't know why Joe Biden is running. He can't remember anything.
President Trump has been a champion for families and in particular for mothers.
And he ran on, I'm going to build the wall.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
We will move the American embassy to the eternal capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem.
Every president since then, Republican and Democrat, has waived the move. President Donald Trump promised during his campaign to move the embassy, a promise he kept in December.
Today we officially open the United States Embassy in Jerusalem.
Thank you, President Trump, for having the courage to keep your promises.
We will make America great again.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Team Trump Online. Promises made, promises kept. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, Senior Advisor to President Trump's re-election campaign and the National Chair of Trump Victory Finance Committee. With me tonight are two of the sharpest minds in politics, Mike Huckabee, former governor of the great state of Arkansas, and Jason Greenblatt, former representative for international negotiations for President Trump. For decades, presidential candidates ran on the promise of moving the United States Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Yet the minute these Republican and Democratic presidents took office, they failed to follow through on their promise. But not President Trump. He finally delivered for one of America's greatest allies, the state of Israel. President Trump formally recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And on this day, 2 years ago, the president opened the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Tonight, we'll reflect on that historic move and discuss the unwavering support President Trump has shown to Israel. Gentlemen, you were both privileged enough to be in attendance in Jerusalem on that special day 2 years ago when President Trump opened the embassy in Jerusalem. Talk to us about what happened on that very special day. I'll begin with you, Governor.
Well, it was surreal. It was just a day I'll never forget, to be there and to see something that we had wanted to see for a long time and that presidents had been promising for over 20 years. But this is a president who promised it like every other president, but the big exception was he delivered. And I happened to be in the White House and was visiting with the president just a couple of weeks afterwards. And I've told people this conversation. I said to him, Mr. President, why did you decide to do this? Because every world leader was telling you not to. People of the State Department were begging you not to do it. There were very few people around you that were suggesting that this is something you should actually do. And you were being told, oh, the world will blow up. It'll be awful. Why did you do it? And Kimberly, as you know very well, and so does Jason, he looked at me very matter-of-factly and said, well, because I said I was going to do it, and it was the right thing to do. That was it. And I thought, how refreshing to have a president who said, this is what I said I was going to do, so I'm going to do it. And besides, it's the right thing to do, no matter how many people it may upset politically. It was just an astonishing moment. But the event that day in Jerusalem was a day that was filled with tears, with excitement and cheers. It was the full spectrum of emotions.
I imagine so incredible, and you really summed it up so well. And this is really true. I mean, there has been no greater friend to Israel than President Trump, and really he understands and appreciates the strength of that relationship. One of our greatest, if not greatest, allies, and so it's very important that he honored them in the way that he did. And I'm proud that he's our president, that he's the one that got it done. Jason, we'll get your thoughts and reflections.
Well, having worked in the White House for nearly 3 years, I was privileged to witness many moving events, but nothing was as moving as two events. One was being in Jerusalem that day, watching the embassy open, and about 5 months earlier than that, being in the White House, watching President Trump finally honor that 1995 law that required the President of the United States to recognize Jerusalem as the capital and to move the embassy. And President Trump always understood it. He made a big point about it during the campaign. He understood that Jerusalem was, is, and always will be the capital for the Jewish people, for the state of Israel. He understood that pretending that it wasn't the capital, even though the Prime Minister's office and home were there, the Knesset, most of the offices of the Israeli government were located in Jerusalem, the farce to try to satisfy people who wouldn't accept that reality was never going to work. President Trump is not somebody who lives in a gray zone. He's a very black and white person. He's committed to the state of Israel, and this was really important to him. And he's a man who always tries to keep his promises. So I was super proud that he was so bold and courageous to make this incredible historic decision.
Absolutely. Amen. Very important. I'm so glad. And so many people were trying to throw him off and say, oh, there's going to be terrible conflict and strife. But, you know, quite the contrary. And at least he had the courage and the resolve to do the right thing. I always talk to the president and say, you're a man of tremendous courage and resolve, because where others lack the will to get something done and make sure, or they second guess things, that he knows when something is the right thing to do and he gets it done. So Governor Huckabee, you've been involved obviously in politics for a very, very long time, and you have seen countless presidents on the campaign trail, you know, making the same old empty promises that they would recognize Jerusalem as the capital and finally move the American embassy to Jerusalem. Why do you think, and you know the president well, why was President Trump able to deliver on this promise while, you know, other leaders failed to act?
Kimberly, I think it's the same reason that he's been so successful, whether it's his economic policies or maybe the policies as it relates to our trade and things that have been truly game-changing for America. And that's because the president doesn't enter into this with the same frame of reference that most politicians do, which is, what are the conventions? What are the norms? How has it always been done? Most people, even people who campaign on the idea of change, once elected, it's like, okay, hand me the oil can. I'm going to oil the machinery that other people have built. This president goes in and says, this machine is not working very well. Let's get rid of it. Right. And as a result, he builds his own machine. I think what he has done is to say, not what has been done, but he looks at it and says, what should be done?
Exactly.
And then he does it. And that's why I think his reelection is critical to not just the advancement of the United States, which it certainly is, but to helping to rearrange the world order so that America is a country that recognizes its sovereignty. When he went into NATO and he looked at all those world leaders, starting with Angela Merkel, and said to her, you guys aren't paying your fair share. People were aghast. They were grabbing their chests. They thought they were all going to die. But he was telling them the truth. And the result, they're all paying more now. So yes. This is a president, and I just will conclude it with this. When he looks at the nation of Israel, he recognizes that the Jewish people are the only people who have ever claimed Jerusalem as their capital, ever in history. They go back over 3,000 years to Jerusalem as their capital. I'm not even Jewish, but I certainly can recognize that it's ridiculous for someone to say, oh, Jerusalem ought to be a divided capital. Why? It's never been anybody else's capital but the Jewish people. So the president looks at it not because the State Department has had a policy. He looks at it historically, biblically, and he says, this is what we ought to do because the obvious is here. I find that refreshing.
Me too. It really is. Amen. I'm telling you, it's just so impressive to see, that he honors his word. And it really is. And, we talked about in the campaign, promises made, promises kept. He brings new meaning to that. I want to point out, gentlemen, too, when you think about it, look at the juxtaposition in terms of speaking of character and resolve on doing the right thing. Joe Biden, 50 years, in politics, he promised it. And, 50 broken, empty promises to Israel by Joe Biden. When you think about that, let it sink in for a moment. Look what President Trump did as soon as he got into office. Joe Biden, once again, promising the world and delivering nothing. And people really need to think about that when comes time to vote on November 3rd about who was there for them. Now, Jason, you played a monumental role in executing this move while serving honorably in the Trump administration. Could you share some insight with us into how this became a reality, sort of like take us behind the scenes, what was going on? Because I think it's fascinating and very interesting, I hope, to our viewers at home. What was the process there then when President Trump decided this was the right decision and the right time, the right move to make?
Sure. Thank you, Kimberly. I also want to address something, though, that you said about Joe Biden. Joe Biden's remark about moving the embassy was that he wouldn't move it back, but it was a mistake. That shows a fundamental misunderstanding of U.S. law. The only reason not to move the embassy was if there was a national security reason to move it, not that it was a mistake. He can't prove why it was a mistake. Clearly, it was not a mistake because we recognized Jerusalem and the embassy was moved, and here we are, and there's no problem. But in terms of the background, I really give President Trump a tremendous amount of credit because, as Governor Huckabee said, he was under tremendous pressure from world leaders. Everybody was calling him, don't do it, don't do it. Blood will fill the streets, all of these threats. And he did his analysis. He relied on the U.S. government. The entire machine of government gave them their opinion. And as always, I've known President Trump for 23 years now. He is able to cut through things and really get to the heart of the issue, understand the conclusions, and make these kinds of decisions. So it was a very extensive process with lots of important brains on the process, but he himself deserves all the credit, and even more so than people could imagine, because of all that tremendous pressure on him not to do it.
Unbelievable, yes, and everybody telling him that he was going to, cause another world war if he did it, that there would be, millions of people killed, all of the above. But again, he had the, foresight to be able to know it was the right thing to do and then act decisively on that promise that he made. Thank you to both. We're going to take a short commercial break here, and we'll be right back with more of Team Trump Online. Promises made, promises kept. Stay with us.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
My administration will take all necessary steps to safeguard our citizens from this threat.
Hysterical xenophobia.
Giving Americans a false sense.
Is it accurate that if these steps had not been put in place, it could have been 2 billion people dead here in the United States?
Yes.
No matter how hard they try to stop us, they can't. We built the greatest economy the world has ever seen, and we're going to do it again.
Together, we're beating back the invisible enemy.
What the federal government did was a phenomenal accomplishment.
Through it all, the world has witnessed the unyielding resolve of our incredible American people.
Promise made, promise kept.
And I'm fighting for you, and I love doing it with everything that I have. And you know that. With the grace of God, we will win this war, and we will win this war quickly. And we will make America great again.
Hey everybody, I'm Laura Trump. The race to November is heating up, and the Trump campaign is gearing up to work harder than ever before to secure 4 more years for President Trump. To achieve this historic win, we need you, your friends, your neighbors, and your families to join our movement. Ready to fight for President Trump? Text ENLIST to 88022 and register at armyfortrump.com today.
We choose truth over facts.
Welcome back to Team Trump Online. Promises made, promises kept. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, and I'm joined by Mike Huckabee and Jason Greenblatt. Now, we just heard about what it was like to be in attendance for the opening of the embassy in Jerusalem and how committed President Trump was to making this move a reality. Now, under President Trump, the alliance between the United States and Israel has never been stronger. On top of recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving our embassy there, President Trump also recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, a move that was critical to the overall security of Israel. Jason, you advised the president when he took this action. What does this action mean for the Jewish people?
Well, it was such a critical issue to the safety and security of Israel, and anything that helps, in this case, very significantly, the safety and security of Israel, helps Jews around the world. It helps any Israel supporter around the world. There was a lot of criticism about that, but any of the criticism was completely unfounded because it is completely consistent with Resolution 242 at the UN Security Council, which requires safe and secure borders. If President Trump would not have done that, we would still be left with the Golan Heights that is in limbo, which would allow Iran an entry point to Israel. Who would get the Golan Heights? Syria? Syria, even before this tragic, disastrous civil war, was a terrible place with respect to Israel. It was at war with Israel. It attacked Israel time and time again. The time came for President Trump to President Trump recognized that the time came for him to assure Israel's safety and security, and that's why he made the decision. And yet again, it was another bold and courageous decision that nobody would do except for somebody like President Trump, who's unwilling to just kick things down the road and pretend that the problem does not have to be solved. He is a problem solver.
I love that. He really is. That's why anybody who knows him well knows that when you go and you have it, there's a problem, come to him, with your ideas, a solution. He's willing to listen, and then he acts decisively. That's true leadership. Mike, we know that the UN has been critical of Israel time and time again, always supporting anti-Israeli resolutions to delegitimize Israel. Why has it been so important for President Trump to push back against the international organizations?
Well, because he's telling the truth, Kimberly. This is something that has been so refreshing. He didn't go to the United Nations hat in hand and pretend that he was going to allow pipsqueak nations from around the world who barely have enough army to patrol a small street to dictate to the United States what our policy would be toward our most important ally in the Middle East and perhaps most important ally in the entire world. Fortunately, he surrounded himself with great advisors, people like Jason, who has been a phenomenal asset to this administration, appointing David Friedman to be the ambassador.
Excellent.
What a great pick that was. Absolutely brilliant. But more importantly, you just mentioned something that a lot of people may not fully grasp. He has phenomenal instincts, gut-level instincts to assess a situation. And I think it became very clear to him that the United Nations is basically an organization that has surrendered itself to the loudest and sometimes the most incompetent voices. So because of the hatred and anti-Semitism that has just been rampant at the United Nations, this president refused to play along and did not allow, whether it was our ambassador before, Nikki Haley, or anyone else, to go in there and pretend that the U.S. was fine with the kind of anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, anti-Israel rhetoric and behavior. As a result, the world knows that Israel is not alone. They have an ally, the United States. Israel has never asked one American soldier to shed blood for them. It's something a lot of Americans don't realize. We've never fought their battles. They fight them themselves. We have supported them with intelligence and with arms, but we have never put the ground in Israel. But we have recognized that it's to our advantage to be a strong ally with Israel against terrorism, and their democracy, their level of freedom, is the one bright spot from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific, across the Southern Hemisphere, throughout Asia. And that's why, thank God for this president and his willingness to recognize the value of Israel as our partner.
Absolutely. Well stated. And it was a very incredible, moment, very moving. I had the privilege and honor of being able to attend with the First Family, the United Nations General Assembly. And when the president, addressed the world, you just really see that this is an individual who really deserves, has earned, and really respects the title of Commander-in-Chief of our country and takes our national security and that of our ally in Israel very seriously. Jason, one of the president's most significant actions was withdrawing from one of the most disastrous foreign policy agreements signed in modern history, the Obama-Biden Iran deal. Now, we know that Iran has consistently destabilized the Middle East, supported terrorist groups, and threatened the existence of Israel. Now, why was this such a critical decision by President Trump to withdraw from the Iran deal?
It's another great example of him not taking the status quo and accepting it. He understood that that deal was a disaster for America, a disaster for its allies, especially a country like Israel, but not just Israel, for Jordan, for Saudi Arabia, for the United Arab Emirates, even, frankly, for the Palestinians, because if there was an attack on Israel by Iran, Palestinians are in that same line of fire. And he was unwilling to simply kick the can down the road. He's worried about my children, my grandchildren, everybody's grandchildren. He did not take office just to keep things calm and simple while he was in office, but rather he wanted to provide real-term solutions. He was not afraid to speak out. He was not afraid to point out that Iran received an incredible amount of money, which they then used to foment terrorism around the world. He's not afraid to speak out and point out that Iran funds Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah, all of these terror organizations that attack Israel relentlessly, that also cause harm to the Lebanese, that cause harm to Palestinians in Gaza. And in my view, Iran is an existential threat to the region and must be stopped. And President Trump was courageous enough to point it out, despite his detractors in the European Union and others who take a different position. But in the end, they will realize how right he was on this.
No, absolutely. It's so important. You can't even, I shudder to think of what would be happening in the world if he, hadn't, put forth the courage to be able to do this. It was such a awful deal, subsidizing essentially state sponsors of terrorists by why would we ever in a million years give Iran money? I mean, it's just, it blows your mind. Mike, so the Democrats have criticized the president for getting out of this, horrible Iran deal and moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. Why are the actions of the Trump administration supporting the only democracy in the Middle East so controversial to the Democratic Party?
I think we're seeing more and more, Kimberly, that the Democrats have decided to side with socialist ideology.
Yes.
I mean, it's beyond me. I don't even understand it. And even Joe Biden, who's supposed to be the moderate, there's nothing moderate about Joe Biden.
No.
Maybe he once was. He's not anymore. He's fully embraced the AOC, Green New Deal. He's embraced all these forms of where the government would basically take possession, not just of policy, but of property. And the net result of that, that's socialism. So when you see this president fighting for freedom, fighting for our civil liberties, fighting for private property ownership, fighting for the right of small business owners to operate their businesses without the big, heavy foot of government on their throats, what we're seeing is something that we ought to always have seen, something that we kind of look at and say, that's how America's supposed to work. And I think a lot of people are frightened who have built this sense of government control, a sense of a big government that tells us when to stand in line and what to do while we're in that line. This is important, and it's one of the reasons that the re-election of this president becomes paramount for the future of our country. There's so many different aspects of it, but just to protect our basic constitutional rights and our personal civil liberties, reason enough.
It's unbelievable. And thank God we have him. That's why we need 4 more years of President Trump to keep America safe, to make great decisions, and to really honor and support the relationship, with our allies, especially in this, area geopolitically. It's, filled with strife and conflict. all the time in the Mideast, and now that's why we need President Trump to work directly with Israel to help keep not just America, but in fact, the world safe. We need that partnership. All right, thank you, gentlemen. We're going to take one final commercial break, and we'll be right back for more on Team Trump Online. Promises made, promises kept.
Ready to go?
This is a crisis.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia.
Biden's son inked $1 billion deal with a subsidiary of the Bank of China.
Why, we're getting nervous, man. China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks.
Since the outbreak, the Communist Party has been mobilizing overseas organizations to buy local supplies and send them to China.
The growth of China is overwhelmingly in our interest.
What a beautiful history we wrote together.
Banning all travel will not stop it.
The president is right. The travel restriction on China, as every public health official we've talked to said, bought the country time.
Hysterical xenophobia.
Xenophobia.
Jim.
I complimented him on dealing with China.
I'm not going nuts.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Democrats destroy everything they touch. That's a fact. After years of failure as a result of their terrible leadership, our nation is finally winning again under President Donald J. Trump. Sadly, the Democrats and the fake news media hate my father more than they love our country, and they're doing whatever it takes to tear us down at the expense of the American people. That's why we need every American patriot to step up and join our fight. Just download our app to receive alerts from the Trump campaign, and you'll get the latest updates on our efforts to keep America great.
Welcome back to Team Trump Online. Promises made, promises kept. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle. Joe Biden and almost every Democrat in Washington railed against President Trump's bold decision to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and to be tough on Iran. Now, this should come as no surprise to anyone that's watched the Democratic Party become increasingly radical towards Israel. It used to be the bipartisan consensus that Israel was our cherished ally. But with the Democrats embracing their radical base more and more every day, their loyalty to our Israeli allies has disappeared. Sleepy Joe Biden was once a vocal supporter of moving the embassy to Jerusalem throughout his Senate career, but the Obama administration failed for 8 years to do it. And now that he's running for president in the new radical Democratic Party, he's claiming it was wrong for President Trump to move the embassy. I'll pose this question to the both of you. How would a Joe Biden presidency damage our long-standing, important relationship with Israel? Jason, I'll go to you first.
What President Trump has done over the last 4 years and what he will continue to do in the next 4 years is strengthen a relationship with Israel and the region generally that was undermined tremendously by the prior administration. One of the things that struck me as so fascinating when I traveled throughout the region at the beginning of President Trump's term is how excited the leadership was throughout the region that President Trump came in and was going to finally make things right again. I'm sincerely afraid that any new administration under a Joe Biden leadership is not only going to undermine that relationship, but wind it backwards in a way that's going to be harmful for Israel, harmful for security and stability in the region, and of course, harmful to the United States of America. The notion that he would reopen the PLO mission, for example, that PLO mission was closed in Washington because President Abbas threatened to bring Israel to the ICC. That is another law on the United States books that required us to close the mission. The fact that Joe Biden would say he would simply reopen it without understanding how he could reopen it, the only way to reopen it is if the Palestinians negotiate peace in good faith. Not only have they not done that, they have simply rejected any form of peace plan, not just the Trump peace plan, but all peace plans prior to it. So I think that they just don't understand the region. They certainly don't understand the value and relationship that Israel brings to the table, and it would be a very, very big problem for our country and for the Middle East as a whole.
Yeah, I think it would be devastating, and the impact would be felt right away. Mike, so let me ask you, do you think that Joe Biden is more aligned with, say, AOC and the Squad, which has become the anti-Israel faction of the Democrat Party? It seems that he is.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, he has embraced a lot of the policies, the Squad, which ought to scare traditional Democrats. I'd like to remind all of the viewers that the Democrats were reliable supporters of Israel forever, up until the last, I guess, couple of administrations. Well, really the last Obama administration, because even under President Clinton, to be fair, America and America's Democrats were still very supportive of Israel. There was very little difference between Democrat and Republican support. It was not a partisan issue. They were our allies, and both Democrats and Republicans recognized that because it was in our best interest. Something happened during the Obama years, something dramatic. They turned from the policies that had historically been American policies, not Republican or Democrat. I could even argue that in some previous years, maybe the Democrats were better allies of Israel. That no longer is the case. So anybody who values Israel, who values our relationship with them, I don't see how they could in good conscience vote for a Democrat to be president. And I recall the words of Bob Gates, former defense secretary under Obama, who made this observation about Joe Biden after he left office. He said that the one consistency about Joe Biden in foreign policy was that over his 40-year career, he'd been wrong on everything.
That just really sums it up, doesn't it? I mean, when you hear that, it's like, do you need to know anymore? I mean, case closed. All right. Or as we said, when I was a prosecutor, people rest their case. All right. So, Jason, what message do you have to Jewish voters out there that still support the Democrat Party, knowing that President Trump has done more for Israel than any other president?
I want to address a very important topic, which is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism has grown in this country. It is ugly. It has reared its ugly head over the past couple of years. And President Trump has not only been a supporter of Israel, but a supporter of the Jewish people. I would say there are very few people in the world who understand President Trump's relationship with the Jewish people as well as I do. Having worked for him as an observant Jew for 23 years, I can base my words on fact and action and emotion that I experienced from President Trump over those years, not simply on rumor, innuendo, political statement, and distortion. He has fought anti-Semitism. His words have been remarkably strong. You go back to his 2018 State of the Union speech. Have you ever seen a speech that touched on anti-Semitism and Jews the way that speech did? He went to Pittsburgh, the site of that tragic attack on the Jewish community. His words were so powerful, so important. So he is a president who will not only support Israel, but support the Jewish people, black and white, no questions asked.
Yeah, unbelievable. It's really true. And I just, I wish I could just get in front of every single Jewish voter and make the case for President Trump, because it's making the case for Jewish Americans. It's making the case for Israel and the importance of this relationship that we have and the strength of President Trump as he stands for Jewish Americans, stands for Israel and our partnership with them as such significant and valuable, cherished allies. We can accomplish so much with President Trump in, and I think it's just incredibly important that we make sure that this happens for the benefit of all. I just want to thank you both and just ask you if you have any, final thoughts before we sign off on this incredible day and occasion.
Kimberly, I'd like to add that it's not just the Jewish people that ought to vote for President Trump over his relationship to the nation of Israel and to the Jewish people, but my fellow evangelical Christians who are very supportive of the Jewish state of Israel and of the Jewish people. I was once asked by one of my very close Jewish friends from New York. We were in Israel together, and I've been with him on several occasions, and he said, I don't know that I fully understand why the evangelical Christians are so supportive of Israel and the Jewish people. He said it's not that true of maybe all the people who identify as Christians, the more liturgical type Christian people, but the evangelicals are, which as we all know, were the margin of victory for the president. And I said, it's quite simple. We're people of the book. We believe the Bible. And we, like our Jewish brothers and sisters, recognize when God said in Genesis, they who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. I said, we take that pretty seriously and pretty literally. I said, this is a president who has blessed the nation of Israel, and we believe we will be blessed for it. So to add a Christian perspective to the importance of this president being supportive of Israel and the Jewish people, I would say that it's the only option that people of conviction, people of principle, when it comes to their biblical roots, I think have when it gets down to the election. If this is an important issue, and it better be, they've got one option: re-elect President Trump.
100%. And Jason, I know you echo the same sentiments as the governor, but yes, make the case to the voters out there.
Well, one other point I want to make, which is so important to the safety and security of America, all of America, is that President Trump supports and has developed the relationships between Israel and its Arab neighbors in such a meaningful way. Relationships that existed 3 years ago are nothing like they are today, and that is so important to the region and therefore so important to the safety and security of America. He has his finger on the pulse on how the Middle East works. He understands the leadership there. He respects the leadership there. They respect him. And that is another key difference between him and Joe Biden. And the last thing I'll say is, let's not forget that under the Obama-Biden administration, on their way out the door, when President Trump already won the election, they left that terrible gift for Israel, where they pretended that even Jerusalem, holy to Jews and Christians and Muslims, was occupied territory. The holiest places in Jerusalem to Jews and Christians was considered occupied territory by the Obama-Biden administration not vetoing that UN resolution back in December of 2016. Shame on them.
Shame on them. Awful. Awful. We have to keep bringing that up. It's important we do not forget. And I want to thank all of you at home for spending your night with us. We need as many patriots as possible to join our efforts to keep America great this November. And here's how you at home can get involved. You can join the Trump Victory Finance Committee. We are a nationwide network of volunteer fundraisers, or bundlers, like I like to call them, who play a crucial role in ensuring President Trump and the Republican Party will be victorious in November. Join our Trump Victory Finance Committee by visiting donaldjtrump.com/bundle or by texting bundle to 88022. As Finance Committee members progress in organizing donations, they reach various fundraising goals and benchmarks that earn them membership status rewards, including invitations to exciting events and special campaign briefings to keep all of our Trump bundlers in the know. And I want to thank our amazing guests this night. I couldn't be luckier to have Mike Huckabee and Jason Greenblatt join me this evening. And a huge thank you to all our amazing supporters at home for tuning in. We appreciate you and we need you. We will see you all next time. May God bless you and your families. Good night.
In 2016, we built an unbeatable operation that changed history. Now, we unveil our next breakthrough. The exclusive Trump 2020 app. This isn't just an app. This is your source for real news, not fake news. Straight from the campaign and the president himself. This is your direct line to give input on key campaign issues. Your portal to register voters. Host MAGA meetups. Your scheduler. Your application on becoming a Trump team leader. Join millions and get a front row seat to our virtual events. Watch Team Trump every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Earn points, get rewarded. Get the presidential photo. Oh, and did we mention it? This is your personal shopper too? So just to repeat, this isn't just an app. This is your tool to keep America great. Join the Army for Trump and download the app today.
Hey, Army for Trump.
As a strong supporter of President Trump, you'll want to be the first to get the latest news on President Trump, the administration's successes, the re-election campaign, and our road to victory in 2020. First, make sure you text Trump to 88022 to stay up to date with President Trump's re-election campaign. And don't forget, our digital media channels are a great way to get the latest news in real time. Next, set up notifications and subscribe to our channels. This way, you can ensure that you are the first to see our tweets and all of the latest from @TeamTrump. To set up Twitter notifications, visit any of our pages and look for the alarm bell symbol near the top of the page next to the follow button and click on All Tweets. What's next? With the election getting closer, we need the help of each one of you on our road to a Trump 2020 landslide. Sign up today to become a digital activist at armyfortrump.com.